Hello, companions. If you don't know me, I am Wells Davis. I am joined today by my co-host, as always, Lawrence Cal, co-founder of the Companion. Hi, Lawrence. How are you doing?
Hello, everyone. I'm doing great.
Yeah. Are you making fun of me, like leaning in on this microphone?
No, no, no. I'm trying to have dulcet tones for everyone's eardrums. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Well, we are joined today by Suzie Edge, a doctor turned historian and author who explores history's most fascinating and often gruesome stories of human bodies, life, and death. Suzie's journey gives her a unique perspective on how history, storytelling, and social media intersect, along with the mental health challenges that have come with it. I am personally, Suzie, a huge fan. You know this, but I have your books here. These are my first edition signed copies that I had shipped all the way over to the States. Um,
Yeah,
so
to be
welcome so
clear,
much.
Wells doesn't read from those books.
No, I
Wells
listened to
keeps them
you
as keepsakes.
read
Yeah,
them.
that's right.
Hi, Suzie. So nice to have you here.
Hello, thank you so much. What a lovely introduction. I'm just
Wonderful.
I love seeing my books in other parts of the world. You know,
Yeah,
they're not
I,
easy to get hold of. Certainly in
they're
across the
not.
pond.
It was like a
Yeah,
pre-order and then a long wait, but I'm so happy to have them. They look so good on my bookshelf. I'm very happy. So
they look shiny as well. That means they must have come from Goldsborough Books, our friends
they
in
did.
London. Yeah,
They
lovely.
did. Suzie, we're so happy to have you. You're kind of our first in a string of literary guests that we're having come talk with us because we do have a book project that we're working on right now. It's kind of a different book project because it's crowdsourced. It's a lot of stories from other people, but I think it's really going to be interesting to get our members and everybody watching some nice perspective on writing and creative process. So thank you for being our first victim, as it were.
Victim. No, I was really chuffed. I've used the word chuffed twice now. I'm so British.
Sweet.
Yeah, I was really chuffed when I got your message to say come and do that because yeah, I love to talk about those things, and you know we've got so much to talk about.
Before we even dive in, though, I saw your TikTok video. Where have you been today? What, like, sounds like it's been a lovely day for you.
It has been a glorious day. I live in the Highlands of Scotland, and we have Highland games. You know, the tossing of the caber and the bagpipes and all the rest of it. And our particular one in our village is the one that the king comes to, and it's the or I should say the monarch, because it's been going on for 100 years. And it is the sort of big ending to the year of Highland Games. And today has been the most glorious day. Normally we're in jackets and it's, you know, it's the end of summer and the autumn's come and the leaves are changing colour and it's drizzling and it's cold and we're kind of apologetic to everyone. But today has just been glorious sunshine. So yeah, we've been celebrating the bagpipes and all the rest of it today in the village, and you might even hear some. I think I can't hear any at the moment, but yeah, they're still going in the village. They'll be going on long into the night, and the beers will be flowing, and everyone will be partying.
I love that. It's interesting because of the place where I live in the world in South Carolina, in the mountains of South Carolina. We actually have Highland Games because there's so much history. You know, people that came over settled here from Scotland and from Ireland and everywhere. So I love the bagpipes. I love the pipes and drums. I welcome the soundtrack if it happens. Suzie, I've never asked you this. I watched you on TikTok. I started watching your videos a while ago. But I would love for you to kind of take us through your unusual career path, I feel, as a as a doctor turned historian and author. How did tell us all about that?
Yeah, it has been very unusual, and people always raise an eyebrow when I start talking about it. I started off actually as a molecular biologist. We don't generally do degrees, you know, pre-med degrees before medicine in the UK. We often go from school straight into medicine, but I didn't. I did a degree first, so I did a degree in molecular cell biology, lots of anatomy and physiology and all the other stuff thrown in, which I absolutely adored. I prefer, I think, the paper and books side of it. But then the school in Aberdeen in Scotland, they said, why don't you come and study medicine? And I thought, that's a great idea. I'll go and do that. So another 5 years at university, and I became a doctor, and then spent those junior years on the wards going from we go from specialty to specialty for a couple of years here. And then I actually stopped and took some time off, and I had a couple of kids, and I didn't work in that time as a doctor, but I ran a photography studio and did loads of other things because I basically can't sit still. And eventually I sort of had a big chip on my shoulder that I hadn't finished what I'd started with the medicine, so I went back. But very quickly I found that I was getting a little bit long in the tooth to be a junior doctor. And yeah, I had a conversation one day with one of my seniors, if you like. He was a friend, but he was a senior colleague. And he said, what do you really want to do? Because we were talking about specialties. And I very much had a thing for, I was drawn to the sexy bright lights of emergency medicine and trauma and all the rest of it. And he said, what do you really want to do? And the first thing that came into my head was, I want to run away to the mountains and write books. And he said, why? And in that moment, when he said why, I realized that that was not everybody's dream, but it certainly was mine. And I thought, I've got to go and do this. And I spent a few years working as a training in orthopedic surgery. And at the same time, I went and did a history degree, because it's very, very different history in terms of the writing process and the, everything that comes before that. It was hard because I was doing this master's degree with all these kids that had come up through the undergraduate schools in history who could speak German and all these other languages that I couldn't speak, because I'd been spending 10 years learning Latin and Greek and all the rest of it for medicine. But I did that and learned, a whole new set of skills. And I came out at the end of it and I thought, I've got to go off on my own. So I ran away to the hills and I started writing books. And in the meantime, in order to get that out there, to get myself out there, I saw that TikTok was going to be big. I saw that it was going to be something, and I got on there, and I wasn't dancing in bikinis like everyone else. I was just telling stories. There was no way that was going to happen. So I just started telling my history stories, and it really took off from there. And my agent saw me, and I got a book deal, and it's just grown from there. And I no longer practice medicine. I no longer go into the hospital, but I certainly use that background and those that learning to do other things, to write books, to tell stories.
Did you always have that dream of wanting to write in the mountains, or was it something that kind of developed later on?
I'm not sure about the mountains. I think they came a little bit later. It's in the middle of winter. I do regret that particularly. I mean, why not the beach? I don't know. I should have. Why wasn't the beach in the Bahamas, the dream? I don't know. But certainly writing was. I've got a massive stack of notebooks somewhere behind me, but they are years and years worth of writings, jottings, notes, ideas, stories that I've started and not finished, screenplays that are hilarious to look at because they're just rubbish. But they're there. That's how you learn the skills, isn't it? That's how you develop.
Absolutely.
You've got to do all that stuff that nobody's going to see for years on end. So yeah, that was always there. And I wrote, while I was a med student, I wrote for the British Medical Journal and magazines. So I was always doing book reviews and writing and doing stuff like that. Yeah. So yeah, it was always in the background. But when you're 17 years old and you're deciding what to do with your life, especially 30 years ago, people, the idea of becoming a writer or studying the humanities wasn't considered very if it wasn't considered a very good idea, because you weren't going to make any money. So
Yeah.
if I was able to do medicine, why not go and do that? And that's the path that I went down.
Yeah. No, I mean, I even think even today it's like not a great financial idea to be a writer, right?
No,
Yeah.
it's definitely not. I mean, it's a nice romantic idea, but yeah, I made a couple of videos recently about this idea that not everybody makes the sort of money that Stephen King and J.K. Rowling come home with. In fact, most of us really struggle, and I do all right compared to most authors. I do all right, but still, my husband couldn't leave his job on the back of my books. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Was there a sorry, I just wanted to kind of continue this conversation just because there's a lot of people out here that are our members. They've wanted to either get into a creative industry, they've wanted to write, they might write fan fiction on the side, they might start getting into it. And I think, like with a lot of us jumping into a creative industry that's quite unknown, and a lot of gigs are freelance, like project to project, or like in television, you get paid zero for a very long time, and then you get a job and you get paid a lot, and then you get paid zero again for a very long time. And so I guess like I remember when I was deciding kind of like big life changes. I was in Mumbai and I was in a Costa Coffee, and I can actually really picture it. And I was wondering if there was anything like that for you, or was it actually that moment with your I can't remember, it was your advisor or your senior advisor asking you, what do you want to do? Was that kind of the moment, or was there actually something else that helped you make that decision?
That was certainly up there as one of those moments. But I think it was more that there were lots of little ones that built up to a point where at one point we were at home. My husband and I were at home working, I recall, and I went through to him. He was sitting at his desk. He's an accountant. He's very, very structured in his thinking about everything, and he's sitting at his desk looking at his banks of spreadsheets on his monitors. And I said, I think I'm going to try and make a go of this. And he sort of turned around and went, "Yeah, all right." And I thought that that was the moment, because I thought I'm going to show you. I don't think I've shown him yet, but we're working on it. We're working on it. It was that moment, and I don't think he was not believing me. I think he was just like, yeah, whatever. Because I've done so many different things. Because I never stop. Because I'm always doing something different and new. And he's like, he's done his. He's always done what he's done, and he's very steady and needs to be, I suppose. But I was like, oh no, man, I can't let you get away with this. I'm going to show you. And that was before I had the book deals and all the rest of it. But it was
Yeah,
certainly
yeah,
a moment. Yeah.
I have a friend who's like your husband who's done the same job. Like, we're in our 40s now. He's done the same thing since he graduated from college. And I'm the exact opposite. Like, kind of like you, I've kind of done a little bit of everything. And it's always been kind of in the pursuit of the goal of, I want to make films. But, I've worked all these other jobs along the way. And I think, if nothing else, I think maybe it's kind of helped you be more flexible with, things that life throws you. Maybe, I'm not sure. I think there's a strength there to those of us who have done so many different things in our lives. I think everybody in this call right now, everybody on this live stream, has done so many different things. So um I don't know, he was so nervous. He just switched to another job, and he's so nervous because he's done the same thing for 22 years now, like, um yeah, I think there's strength in that. It's terrifying and it's daunting and it's scary to be like, I'm going to try this new thing. But I think there are definite benefits for that, to that as well.
I'm very competitive to the point where it can be annoying to other people. I think I can be very, very competitive. But I can say that actually I'm competitive in the moment in what I'm doing. But when it comes to the end of the project, I'm like, win or lose. I'm like, okay, we're done, next. And then it starts again. And I think that's something that I've learned to do, is that I'm really, really driven and into that thing. But once that thing, as I say, win or lose, second place or bottom or top of the podium, then great. But next, and yeah, I mean, my husband's nearly 60, and I think he just can't get his head around it at all. He's like, well, why wouldn't you just keep going? I'm like, because there's something else to do. Because there's something else that's fun, and yeah, we're very different people like that. They say opposites attract, don't they?
Do you find, talking about finishing one thing and then on to the next thing? I've talked about this with Amanda Tapping before, on as far as mental health is concerned. Do you ever feel like those big roller coaster like dumps in between that? And like, anytime I'm finished with a project, I go through a couple of weeks of like being really down about things before I can pull myself up and out of it. Do you ever experience anything like that?
I live on a massive roller coaster all the time. Yeah, and sometimes it feels like that's blindfolded. I don't know when the next, I don't know what's coming. No, yeah, I do. I am a bit like that. And the problem that actually throws up a problem for me, because what I tend to do is, knowing that's coming, I'll agree to four or five other things to fill the
Ooh,
gap, and
right.
then I get overwhelmed, because I come through and I'm like, well, actually, I made all these promises that I'm not able to keep, and so yeah, I'm not sure I've managed to figure out how to navigate that particular roller coaster yet.
It's a
We'll see.
tricky one.
I guess some people get on roller coasters and love it, but I'm not. Yeah, I
yeah.
definitely go up and down, and I perhaps know it's coming, and will try and fill the gap, and then get too mixed up in too many things. Mm.
There's a book I've been reading called Transitions. It's kind of an older book. I think it was originally written, I don't know, I'm going to get it wrong, 30, 40 years ago. It's kind of been rewritten since then. People continue on. And it was, I think, originally written by a guy who basically became a multimillionaire in business and then was like, well, now what do I do? My entire life was built for this career. And like, I don't actually have to work anymore. And, he talks about these actual phases that you have to go through. There is a death, as in once you no longer have to make money, like that life that you were, it's kind of over. And I think Wells, kind of like what you're talking about, you have that, whether you're making a film or we just did this big Kickstarter campaign, and like we knew exactly what we had to do every single day and every single morning, and then it ends, and you almost have to like um, mourn the loss, I guess, of that project or whatever it is. Then you sort of, I think, neutral zone yourself through, and then you find a new beginning. Um, I guess it sounds like that with you a little bit, Susie, except you're taking on another thing to kind of fill that void. Yeah.
I think it's getting an annoying habit that whenever I hand something in to an editor, so I've got three different editors, three different publishers at the moment with different projects.
Oh, okay.
Whenever I had something in, that same day, my agent will get a WhatsApp message with an idea for the next thing, and she's always like, "That's lovely. Can you go and have a cup of tea? Can you go for a
Yeah.
run? Can you go and just do something else?" And I'm like, "No, no, no. We've got to think about the next thing." And I think you're right, Wells. I think that's trying to fill that void so that I don't sort of dwell on the loss of the last thing.
Yeah,
I read
it's
on.
real.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, I was just saying it's
Yeah.
real. To me, I have like even after like Lawrence was saying after this Kickstarter that we just finished, it's just like you the anticipation you're building up, you're trying to work toward the thing and then it's done and then you're like, "Huh."
Mm.
It's just
Yeah.
this like sitting in it is quite difficult sometimes. I find myself going through that a lot this year because we've done a lot of different project based things or we go to cons or things like
Yeah.
that you're building up to. So,
Yeah, Susie, I saw on your website you super into rugby, played rugby when you were younger. Um, you uh, are a black belt in Suyang Do, and I'm kind of wondering, is that part of like the, I guess like whenever you have a project and you need another project, is it like that, or is it actually something else that's kind of different where it allows you to do something physical or something else that's not just book writing?
Well, those things came before the book writing, I suppose, because
Okay, okay,
I started both of those when I was in sort of mid-teens, and so I've always been physical. I've always done physical sporting things. I've always been sort of pretty athletic, and when I went up to university when I came up to Aberdeen, which is in the northeast of Scotland, where it gets pretty cold. My next thing was going to be rowing. I was going to do rowing. That was going to be it. And then I stood in the river one day for like an hour, and I thought, actually, this clashes on the timetable with rugby. That's terrible. I'm going to have to not to do that. So maybe had the timetable clash not been there and it hadn't been frozen north, I might have gotten into that as well. But those things are, yeah. I think interestingly, actually, in not so much the rugby, but certainly in the Siangdo, my instructors always said to me, "You need a." I seem to be more enthused, more motivated when I've got a project end. So I've got the next grading, the next belt level, the next Dan level or whatever. And they've told me that they see me slump when I don't have a date, a goal like that. So that's quite interesting that you bring that up. So I wouldn't have thought about it like that at all. But yeah, thinking it through, maybe I do like those,
it's
still like those goals.
It's like what we were talking about in the last with Michelle Hurd, Lawrence, the, like, I need that race T-shirt, I need the medal, I need the, like same, like, when I find myself in a slump running, I go, "What ridiculous running, like, race can I sign up for?" To kind of kick myself into gear, so I understand that completely.
Yeah, and lately I've just had a fixation on marketing the books and what I can do on TikTok, what I can do with Instagram, what I can do with these things, and that's become the fixation, the goal, but they're never ending goals, those, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're movable goalposts. You get to 500,000 and you want 1,000,000, you know.
You were talking about marketing, focusing on marketing. So I'd love to
Mhm.
talk about social media. This is how we connected, and I it's interesting. You started when you started that right, like to go full into writing was when you hopped on TikTok, and we all know that social media can be a wonderful place. It can be a terrible place. Um, we've talked about it a couple of times, the idea of manufactured perfection for influencers that are on, and how it can be detrimental um, to people's mental health in it. So, but I noticed that you specifically, if you're going through a downtime or something, you tell your people about it. You tell your followers, and you explain that it's okay to feel that way. And I really like to see that transparency and that authenticity. I think it's very important in those spaces. Um, how do you feel as your role in this? You have over 500,000 TikTok followers now. How do you feel about your role in doing that as marketing, but also how people see you, and how the importance of that?
When I a long time ago, when I right at the beginning when I started using TikTok, which was very early, I think it had just become TikTok because it had been, oh, I can't remember what it was called, the lip syncing.
Yeah.
Musically
Musically,
before.
musically,
Yeah.
yeah. Just after that, and I saw a lot of people doing very well, especially during COVID when people were getting a huge amount of followers for dancing or whatever, and then they would start responding in the negative a lot to negative comments, and then you're watching video after video of them just having a go at people, and I just thought it's so unhealthy, and also it's quite dull watching other people having a go at other people because they said something funny about your hair. I mean, it's like,
Mhm.
move on. I just, swipe, swipe, swipe. So I said to myself, I'm never going to post a video if I'm grumpy, and if I'm feeling really down, I'm not going to do that. But having said that, I've had a rough time of it lately, and I don't want to be pretending that everything is all right either. So there's a bit of a balance. I don't want to be online crying. I just don't want that for myself. And there's a certain part of me thinks, why would you? Why, I don't want to do that. But also, I don't want to be skipping around pretending that everything's okay.
Mhm.
I had two very close together in time, but very close family members die in the last few months. And it's been really hard, you know.
Mhm.
And so I'm not going to pretend that everything's wonderful. The other thing is that yes, my ultimate goal is selling books. I'm not going to deny it. That's what I want to do. I think a lot of people are like, oh, you can't say that. You can't say that out loud. Like, no, no, it's what I
You can
do.
say
I want
that
to
out
sell books.
loud. Yeah.
Like, I want to sell books. But at the same time, you can come on here. You can come on here on YouTube or on Instagram, TikTok, or whatever, and just be talking about writing. Then the only audience that I'm going to find is other writers. So I've got to find something else, and I've got to build a community around people interested in me and what I do. So I feel like I should now and again be authentic and say, look, I think it was last Tuesday, I had a really bad day, and I was trying so hard to make videos replying to people about history. I mean, it wasn't replying to people, your hair looks shocking. It was history
Right.
questions.
Right.
But even so, I just felt myself coming across as being, grumpy, having a go at everybody. And I knew that if I posted the comments, I would react to them in the negative. If somebody tells me I've forgotten to talk about Lady Jane Grey, and I get all defensive, so I don't want to be defensive. I don't want to be like that. So it's a real. What I'm trying to say is, I want to build up a community where people are interested in me and what I do, and therefore I can't pretend. So
Mm.
that's why you've seen some videos lately of me saying, look, you know what, I'm having a rubbish day. Just But then that throws up some interesting stuff, because what it throws up is an enormous amount of comments of people saying how wonderful they think you are. And
Yeah.
that's not easy to deal with either, because I'm sitting there
No.
thinking, what it's that I actually find those just as hard to deal with as the ones that people say, "Oh, who do you think you are?" Kind of, and you get those as well. But yeah, as soon as you make a video that's vulnerable, people are like jumping in there because they want to be there for you. They want to look after you. They want to show you that you care. They want to show you that they care. And they're going, "Oh, but you're so wonderful." And I'm like, I can't deal with that. I just, yeah,
Yeah, massive
it's going
imposter
back.
syndrome. Just kidding.
Huge, huge, and it's back.
I definitely think we've felt that too with the when you show when you're open and talking about how you're feeling and people come at you with such wonderful messages. It is overwhelming. I've definitely had those moments. I think Lawrence has had those moments too. So yeah, for
People can
sure.
keep sending me wonderful messages. I'm
Yes,
fine with
yes,
that. I'm
I'm fine with it as well.
just yeah,
Send all the lovely
send a
messages you
few
would
more.
like.
Keep it going, keep it going. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, there are times very early on. Actually, I was there was an American woman. I can't remember her name, who was in my DMs quite a lot, and she was saying, uh, a lot. We were talking about how tricky it was to deal with not just the negative comments but the positive ones as well. And she said, and I said, I'm terribly British. I don't know how to respond. And she said, just say thank you.
Mm.
Let's just start by saying thank you. And I was like, oh, well, that's a revelation. And now, I say that, and if people want to talk some more, they do, and if it's a good place to start. So I just start by saying thank you, and that.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I wouldn't have done that before. I think I was just kind of overwhelmed and didn't. I don't. I want to acknowledge people. If someone says that to you, you want to acknowledge it.
I have
So
that.
just starting.
I have that. Like even yesterday, because we've been so busy, I haven't had a chance to go through like our kind of customer service emails, and some of them were very nice messages. And I sometimes will see an email, and I feel like the other person has spent 10, 15 minutes crafting a message. It might be a longer message, and I want to sit there and give them 15, 20 minutes back. But then I'm end up sitting there for 2 hours, kind of crafting all these responses, and I understand that it's not sustainable, but at the same time you kind of want to do that too. So yeah, it's not thank you is good, is a good piece of advice.
I think
Yeah.
that the other thing is that sometimes I've had messages like that as well, and they can be very intense. You can have people
Mm.
saying that they are going through incredibly difficult times, and during my last chance chemo, I was reading your book and it cheered me up. Just somebody to send a message like that is actually quite it is intense. But
Mm.
I want to give them the best response. I want to acknowledge, and often I find that I just get stuck
Mm.
and I
Yeah.
don't reply because I'm like, well, I'll I'll have the means, I'll have the capacity, whatever, to reply to that tomorrow. And tomorrow comes and goes, and the next day comes and goes, and I don't. And there have been, I freely admit, and I feel terrible for it. There have been ones that I haven't got back to in that instance because I just haven't been able to. Um, I just haven't been able to get my head around doing it. And had I just said, "Thank you, I hope you're well," or something like that, it would have been at least an acknowledgement. And it hasn't always happened that way. But yeah, it isn't sustainable to be able to reply to everybody all the time, and
Yeah.
uh, and that's hard. That's hard to admit because you want to, because I want
Yeah.
to, but I can't always. Not with the
Interesting.
volume.
Yeah, yeah. We don't have that volume problem, everyone, so you can keep sending them to us. No, no, okay.
But we have
um,
had but we do have the intensity, and it's actually
Mhm.
it's
yeah,
quite lovely to read, and it can be a little overwhelming sometimes, but I just yesterday, I was kind of in a rough spot. I tore the meniscus in my knee last weekend, so I can't run right now. It's like I'm really frustrated. I can't do what I usually do to perk myself up, and, I got a really lovely email from somebody that was it was just like the glimmer I needed because it pulled me out
yeah.
of, like, this big funk that I was in, so it sometimes it hits right at the right time, you know?
Yeah,
Oh yeah, for sure. Interesting. I'm going to tie this transition into your book Mortal Monarchs, but also Vital Organs to a certain degree, which is oftentimes when we see influencers or TikTok, folks who have 500,000 followers like yourself, there is a sheen, kind of placed upon it. And we're just people, I guess, or you're just people. And then I think similarly, when reading Immortal Monarchs, and I think it might have even been in this like kind of summary blurb I read of Vital Organs, but even if you're a monarch, you get shot in the eye with an arrow, you dead. And and obviously they would have been the influencers of their time. And I kind of wondered if you, through your writing of these books, or that book, did it change your perspective on monarchs and celebrity, or people of power and mortality and all those kind of things?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. In both regards. So if you want to talk, so with the monarchs, for
Mhm.
sure. I mean, I was never really. People think that I'm this big monarchist, which is really funny because, I mean, when people say to me, "Oh, you're a monarchist," I'm like, wrong way. I wrote a book about how they all died. I don't
Yeah,
understand how you think that I'm showing all the love here, but people do. And I think the other thing is because I live next to Balmoral, and the king gave me a wave today. Not me personally, I was just in a crowd, but people think that I'm a massive monarchist. And actually, what it threw up for me was the over the years the people's need for power and influence and money and greed and nepotism and all these things. They've been there for 1,000 years, and they're not going anywhere. I think it's just that's what it brought up for me. We talk about William and Harry, the current princes, fighting, and I could tell you a story from 900 years ago with a couple of princes called William and Harry who were fighting. This is just it just shows you that this is human beings, and this is power and what it does to you. So in terms of the monarchs, yes, it did make me feel that way. And it makes me look at the current royal family and just go, yeah, they're just doing what the others did 1,000 years ago and have always done. So I have no massive reverence for any of them, really. And then when it comes to
yeah, yeah.
mortality, yes, as well, because everybody dies. When I was writing that book, my father died, and it was actually an enormous help because I just kept telling myself that everybody dies. And in the in this particular instance, it was very sudden. He basically dropped down dead, and there was a moment just before that when I had told him some bad news, and so going through my head was that was my fault that I did that. But actually, I could tell myself, no, he's actually 75 years of the partying that
Yeah,
he did, and the drinking and the eating what he ate and all that all that other stuff is what broke his heart a long time before that event happened. So those things, so that was actually really cathartic. It was actually quite, it was quite good in that regard. And then as well with vital organs, I guess it's all more about disease and that sort of thing rather than death. So yeah, there's that aspect of it as well, that these things happen, and grateful that we have what we have now. I've been quite down on the medical world for quite a long time. I feel that this is going off on a massive tangent, but I do feel like
let's do it. Let's
medicine
bash the
and
medical
doctors,
field right now. Yeah.
we're not we're not doing people a service because it's too much. I think it's too much money driven, it's too much throw out the drugs driven, and it's not enough prevention driven in terms of
Mm,
diet and all the rest of it. But so I've been very down on the medical profession of late, and actually vital organs made me realise that I do appreciate a nice bit of anaesthetic, and I do appreciate some good antibiotics and all these other things as well. So yeah, brought that home to me. What's really interesting is that in the last couple of minutes since I've been answering that question, what has also gone through my head is that I've been struggling over the last couple of months, having just lost my mother, and yet maybe what I need to do is stop and tell
mm.
myself the same thing that I told myself. Not no, not poo, that one. The same thing that I told myself when my dad died. I haven't been doing that. So thank you for the therapy session. I much appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
You'll get a bill in the mail. Um,
yeah,
oh wait, that's just me in America.
yeah, yeah. Here we provide that service. Wells is yeah.
I know, I'm aware.
Well,
Speaking
yeah,
of,
but I mean, I'd have to wait for it. So
yeah,
we'll
yeah.
see this as a private session. It's great.
Oh well,
So,
it's Oh, go ahead, Wells.
oh no, I was just gonna say, I think because you just pointed to poo up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've gone from those 2 books into poo throughout the ages. And I know, Lawrence, has a particularly funny question about that too, but going into children's writing, like, what sparked that? And
I'd like to say that this was all my idea, but in the spirit of being transparent and honest, it had nothing to do with it. I had an email one day from the publishers. I've done it again, from the publishers saying, "Can you write us some books?" I can't. I
Was it
can't.
like,
I
can you
can't
write books
pretend.
on poo, or was it like, can you write
Yeah.
books
Oh. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We want some kids' books. At this age, we want some grisly, gruesome stuff. We want history and human body stuff. And I initially said, well, why don't I write a kids' book? This into a kids' book. And they were like, yeah, or you could just write about poo.
Yeah.
And I had so much trouble telling people about it. I'd be in the pub having a drink, meeting people in it. What do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm currently writing a book about poo for children. And
I
they
feel
did,
like that's a natural bestseller. Like, that's the topic.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
or actually, I knew that I was going to get on. I knew that I was going to get on with the editor of this book because the first thing he said to me was, "This has got a #2 bestseller written all over it."
Oh
Yeah.
god.
And I thought, "Oh, I like
Whack,
you."
whack.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, they came to me and said, "Will you do this?" This is a series, so the next one is called "We Snot and Slime Through Time," and that's I saw the cover for that yesterday, but I'm not allowed to share it yet.
Oh, cool.
All right.
So that's coming in April as well. But yeah, then there's another one, a standalone kids book, which is about the history of medicine. So it goes to
So you're also writing the slime. I can't remember what it was. The slime
yeah,
sludge one. Okay.
we
Okay.
we snot and slime. So it's
These
lots of stories
These-
about well, it's about it's historical. So the stories are what we've done with urine throughout history, good and bad. So we've
Yeah.
used it in all sorts of processes, and not just that, but and also snot and or earwax and all sorts of
Oh,
all
yeah.
sorts of bodily fluids, which sadly is not an expression you can use in a book for 8-year-olds. But we've had to come up with other ways of putting it, which has been fun.
My
Go on.
question was, and I don't know if it'll apply now,
I was
but I guess it
laughing
will.
at what's coming.
Which is, when did you first gain the respect of poo? And do you ever reflect on your own poo? Because I actually, for some bizarre reason, have a very specific story to it as well. But I'm going to ask you first.
I'm not actually sure I understand the question, to be honest.
Well, okay, I'll give you my story, and then
Okay, yes, let's do that.
and then maybe it'll spark something. Which is, I was in college, and I have a second degree in psychology. I don't talk about it very often, but I have a second degree, and in one of the psychology classes, it was all about like reflection and thinking about yourself and discovering yourself. And one of the assignments I remember was, you have to poo, and then you have to stare and look at your poo for, I think it was like at least 15 minutes. It was definitely a very long time that was not natural. And then, as you have thoughts, you start to write them, and then eventually you have to write an essay. And every week we had to do something weird, and that was, poo was one of the weeks. And what's interesting is, in the beginning, at least for me, or my process, because I can actually still distinctly remember the poo that I had to look at for 15 minutes. You don't forget that. And then, about what you talk about, and this is 24 years ago, 25 years ago. In the beginning, it's just sort of poo, and obviously it smells, but it doesn't smell bad to you because you're on poo. And then but then that gets boring after a while, and you start to reflect, like, oh well, I guess what did the poo come from, or what I have to eat yesterday. And I remember actually gaining this really deep respect, bizarrely, of the whole process of me creating this poo and the food that went into it. That's kind of what my brain started going into after the 15 minutes. And so, yeah, I had this like really weird revelation, newfound respect. I think everyone, if you haven't done that, you should do that. Take a poo, look at it for a solid 15 minutes, and just write up, just journal what you start thinking about. Who knows what it'll take you.
I'm lost for words for once.
Okay.
Well, that's not something I have ever done. However, I mean, I did train as a doctor, and doctors are notoriously obsessed with bowel movements, aren't they?
Good point.
Nurses and doctors are notoriously obsessed. I think once you start working on a hospital ward, you have a whole newfound appreciation for bowel movements that are normal.
That's what I'm
Normal.
looking
Yeah,
for. That's what I'm looking
normal.
for. There it is. Yeah, that's when you gain the respect for poo on the
Yes,
hospital.
indeed.
Yeah.
In that case, I gained a respect for poo when I worked on an ambulance, for sure.
Mm.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole. I mean, there's a whole. You can start looking at all the sort of functions of the body and everything that it does, and our initial thought is to be repulsed and to, because often you have to shy away from things like this because they can be dangerous and we can full of bugs and all the rest of it. But when I was writing, particularly maybe not the poo one, but the wee one, suddenly I'm looking at things like earwax and I'm looking at snot, not actually looking at them. That would be
Mhm.
weird. But I was thinking about them, writing about them, and all sorts of interesting bodily fluids like cerebrospinal fluid or the like, and what happens when you raise a blister on the skin and all that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
And yeah, I start to I didn't start, but I certainly cemented this appreciation for the human body again and how it works and why it does the things that it does, because all of those things have a function. All of those things have a function that are useful to us to keep us alive or to or to reproduce or all those sorts of things. I didn't write too much about reproduction when it came to the kids' book, but that appreciation was there. Yeah, when you start writing that about those things again, suddenly I have this. I remember how much I do love studying and talking about the human body, which is always where I come back to in the end.
Um, there's no really good way to segue away from the poo conversation.
It never
So I'm
is.
just I'm just gonna do it. Uh, I have a question about where you are right now because you write from a what do you call the space that you write? Is it a shed? Is it where like
Yeah, it's a shed. It's a good 100-year-old shed, mind you.
I love it.
We've got really old photographs of the village, and I'm like, that's my shed.
Oh,
It is a shed. I did strip it back and insulate it and all the rest of it, and carpet and everything else. It's actually called London, my shed.
it's called
Oh.
London.
It's called London. Yeah, there is a reason for that. So in the village where I live, Robert Louis Stevenson, in a
Mhm.
good while ago, was here for a summer, and he wrote Treasure Island in a house just a couple of houses away from where I
Oh
am.
wow.
But he was very famous then, and people would come and knock on the door looking for him, and they'd say, "We want to speak to him." And he got a bit annoyed about that because he had work to do, and he worked in a shed in his back garden. And he decided one day to call that shed Edinburgh because that's where it was from. He said, "I'm going to call my shed Edinburgh. If anyone knocks on the door," the staff said, "Oh, I'm sorry, he can't come to the door right now. He's in Edinburgh." So
Perfect.
I decided because I had a stint the whole last 12 months. I've been up and down the road to London all the time. I was like, I'm going to call my shed London. So this is London.
I love it.
It's very small, and I love it so much that my husband came out one day. He's like, I like your shed. I'm going to build myself a cabin. He's got a massive cabin. He's got a massive cabin with sofas, huge bookshelves,
Right next
lovely,
door. Right
right next
next door.
door, like a few feet away. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
So
the
I throw
reason
things out the window.
I love it. The reason I ask you about it is because I personally have issues with trying to be creative at home in my house with a lot of distractions, and I know this
Yeah.
kind of goes into the conversation of what tips and tricks for trying to write or trying to be creative, and what other sort of tools do you use or methods do you use to kind of help focus yourself. Because I find it quite difficult sometimes when I'm at home and the dogs and there's like all this stuff going on and I can't focus on what I'm trying to write or what I'm trying to do. And so I love the shed, and I've read this online too about other people that they have their creative sheds, whatever they're doing. But do you have any other tips or tricks that you use?
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that. I feel the same way because we have the house actually is probably going to be demolished because it needs to be replaced. It's very old and tatty. So we're talking to an architect the other day. And we're standing in the back garden, and she said, "So we'll make space and we'll put in a study for you and a study for your husband." I was like, "No, no, no, no! I'm leaving the house to go out to my shed to do some work. So we can save however many thousands of pounds for that room, because I don't want to work in the house, because I'm the same. I want to empty the dishwasher, or I want to play with the dog, or I want to do so. Just, there's always something, isn't there, in the house, and I need to separate and get away from that. I used to be, when I wrote my first book, I was very, very disciplined. I'd get up in the morning, I would write my morning pages, and I would take the supplements, and I would do all the, have a list of things, everything, and then I would just get on with it. And at lunchtime, I would stop and have lunch with my husband, because he works at home as well. But again, he's the accountant in him. He's very disciplined, but he's employed by somebody, so he has that timetable with them. And often we'll be speaking to people in America, so he has that time gap, the one that we've got just now.
Yep.
So he's very disciplined in his time, and I would slot into that. I'm certainly not one, people always say, try and do something else creative, go and play the piano or do something else before, and that gets the creative juices flowing. And I love to try that. I'm just always keen to get on, because I'm always up against a deadline. There's nothing like a deadline to get the creative juices flowing. And I know people say that that's not the case. You can't, when you're doing this professionally, you can't wait for the muse, and you can't just sort of decide to do it when you're having a good day. You've just got to crack on, because actually what's more motivating is looking at what I'm capable of doing in a day, and looking at how many days I've got, and saying, you've got to try and meet these targets every day, because if you don't, you're going to be up against it at the end. I'm always up against it at the end, because I always fail with those everyday targets. But one of the best ways to do that was in that way. Another thing that I did with these two books was, I keep pointing that way. I've got to learn. It's that way. That is not
There's
a
no
poo,
mirror.
by the way.
There's no mirror. Yeah.
There's no mirror. That is not a poo. That is a little soft toy otter.
Oh.
People keep asking me. So another thing that I had, which was really helpful for a while, was that I was part of a group on WhatsApp, and it was actually a bunch of people who were writing PhDs at Cambridge, because one of my friends was, and she just joined me into this group. But what we would do is we would say at 10 to the hour, so whatever 50 to the hour, we could talk. And in that time, as long as we said what our goal was for the next hour, we could talk about whatever. You could say what was going on, or what's, and then we would not talk for 50 minutes, 50. And in that time, then we'd sort of get a big chunk of stuff done. And I know people do that for a lot shorter amount of time, the Pomodoro measurements and all the rest of it, 15, 20 minutes. But that group I found was so helpful, because I would not want to, because I couldn't talk to them. I didn't want to sort of let them down, I suppose, by coming back and saying, oh no, I just sat and watched Netflix, or whatever. So that was something that was really very helpful. I know when we talked before about these things, you mentioned exercise and meditation and all that sort of stuff. So meditation is only something that I've started very, very recently with the help of a coach. But exercise is something else. About 3:00 in the afternoon, I noticed that I was having a slump. And that's when I take the dog for a walk, or go for a run, or go and lift weights in my garage. So I keep twitching, actually, because I just upped the weights a couple of days ago, and I'm feeling it. I noticed that I'm feeling a bit twitchy. So about 3:00 in the afternoon. 3:00 in the afternoon, I'll go and do something else that's physically, going to just, doesn't always take my mind off it, because I'm often out thinking when I'm running or walking the dog, but it just gets me away from the desk, and I'm not sitting staring into space or scrolling through TikTok or whatever for that hour.
Right. That 3:00 is hard. I think 3:00 for me too. That time of day is just really rough to keep focus through it, which is really funny, because that's Lawrence's time of day where I'm having my morning meeting with him. So he's just has
it's actually weird. I'm super productive at that moment.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I'm pretty unproductive in the morning a lot of times. If I get one thing done, I'm pretty happy.
Suzie, we're coming to the end of our hour, and we do have a tradition here where we have the previous guest ask the current guest a question, and they don't know who it is, and they have to ask a question. So I'm going to play your question, and I also want you to think about a question that you can ask the next person as well.
Okay.
But here's your question first.
I guess I'll just, because often we ask questions of our past. So I guess my question would be, now that it's 2024 and things are kind of spicy, what is it that you hope for the future, and what is it that you hope to do and achieve in the future?
That's that's a question that potentially has an enormous amount of scope, isn't it?
Mhm.
However, I'm going to make it quite small and quite in the moment, because because of the last 6, 7, 8 months that I've had, I actually hope for some calm for a wee while. Whether or not I can bring that to myself or find it through something else, I don't know. But I just would like for a little while to just to find some to find some peace and some calm, and then to come out the end of it raring to go again. Yeah, I mean, I could answer 500 different things about what I'm going to write, what I'm going to do, and what film we're going to make, and all that sort of stuff. I could do that, but actually, I think just some calm.
I think that's a reasonable request of the future for you, for sure. Things can get really hectic, and I think especially the world and everything that's going on in it can get so hectic, and that's kind of what Michelle was talking about. She talked about that a lot in that live stream, that, hoping for that for yourself, I think is a very good way for you to, that's self-care, and that's taking care of yourself for hoping for that.
Well, as a friend of mine said to me recently, I can't look after other people and my friends if I'm going through so much myself, and appreciate that. I appreciate that for him, but it's quite hard to admit it for oneself sometimes, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Again, with Michelle we talked a lot about the oxygen mask on yourself first,
Mm-hmm.
that concept. But it is difficult. I think we all want to, jump in and help everybody else, and, you know, sacrifice ourselves a little bit instead.
Sometimes that's actually the easiest thing to do, rather than dwell inside your own issues, isn't it? Yeah,
100%.
it actually sounds quite. It sounds like you're doing everything for other people, but in a way, it's almost quite selfish, because you're wanting to, because you're doing it to hide all the other stuff.
You're
You know,
avoiding, yes.
you're avoiding.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But we'll tell everybody. We'll tell ourselves that we're being selfless in that moment. But yeah, it all comes back to the same thing, doesn't it? You got to help yourself first.
It does. I know you're a Trekkie or a Trekker, whatever you prefer to call yourself. And it wasn't you
Hi
were telling
everyone.
well, it'll perk some interest in the comments for sure. We have Star Trek and Stargate fans all in our members and everything.
Of
But you
course.
were saying that you were working, but you were also watching Star Trek the other day or something. Were you watching Next Generation?
Yeah, I have. I can't work without 101 different other things going on. Sometimes I'll have two different things in two different earphones, and I'll have something on the telly. That's just how it is. When I wrote Mortal Monarchs, the first book, I went back to the beginning of the Next Generation and watched the whole thing. I used to watch it when I got home from school, first time round. I'm admitting my age. It was on at sort of 5 in the afternoon, in the 90s. I think it started about. We're talking about the Next Generation. It started about 88, something like that. So I would watch it every night, when it finished, it sort of started again, and it went round on this loop.
Yep.
And I watched it like that. And then when I started writing this book, I thought I need something that's going to last, and I went to that because it's comfort as well, because I'm looking for comfort in that moment. And I watched it again all the way through, and it was just landed so differently.
Mm.
It landed very differently in my mid 40s than it did as a teenager. There's just so much more to it than I would have recognized as a teenager. I mean, I guess those things had an effect in terms of thinking, a way of thinking, but now, yeah, so much. I also got to the end of that, and I thought, oh, what am I going to do now? So I watched Picard. Picard was amazing, wasn't it? I just was gutted when that finished. Yeah. But of course, that makes me look at it and go, oh my god, we're going to lose him soon. No.
You're watching the series, like watching it, not like it's on in the background while you're writing, or both.
It's on in the background, but I'm very much aware of it.
Okay.
I actually, to begin with, in all honesty, I was working my shed, there was something wrong with my shed, and I was working in a corner of the living room. And what had happened was after dinner, the family, we started watching the X-Files, and I would have my back to the TV because I thought I've got to get my work done. And the family are watching the X-Files behind me, and the sound of the X-Files is really like creepy as hell.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's creepy anyway. The X-Files, isn't it? So it's amazing to watch anyway. But the sound, just the sound, it would just. I thought this is going to be having an effect on my writing. What is going to pop? Which little green alien is going to pop up in this book about Monarchs? It was really weird, and I thought I can't do this. I can't just have a background noise. I've got to be seeing it. And that's when I moved out and started watching. So yeah, it's on. I watched. So the next one, this one, I watched The Following, which is a serial killer kind of show. Absolutely superb. I watched that, and I'm pretty sure it's going to have had an effect. And the Pooh one, I watched. What's the devil? There's a kind of silly Hollywood devil,
like Lucifer.
Lucifer. I watched before watching that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you'll probably find references in the book somewhere.
Yeah. That's great, though. Then people can try to figure out like what was.
Yeah, I heard from someone writing a book. Their advice was, "All right, every time I'm going to write a book, the first thing I do is spend an hour making a music playlist." It's like, what? And they have to like get all the songs, and it gets perfect, and then they listen to that playlist over and over and over and over. You know, for them to.
I have that for my fiction for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Did we get the question from you? We didn't.
We didn't. We
skipped over it. I skipped over it. So, Suzie, before we end, can you ask a question of our next guest, not knowing who that guest may be? Though, if you check our calendar, you probably can find that out. But please ask a question that anyone could answer, basically.
Okay. They say that everybody has a book in them. So what book are you going to write next?
Thank you so much, Suzie, for being here. We've come to the end of our hour, but it's been a lovely conversation. Do you have anything you would like to tell people about? Can we point them to something for you? We'll have links up for your books and everything. We do already anyway, but anything else that you would like to plug or say anything about, please?
Oh, well, we've talked loads about my books and what I do and TikTok and all the rest. We didn't really talk about my fiction either. That's coming as well. So I'm just going to I haven't finished it yet, so I'm just going to keep talking about it, giving people little snippets over on TikTok. So if you want to join me there, that would be great.
So Suzie, what was? How do people follow you again?
That is a very good question. Yes, you can find me on TikTok at Suzie Edge, SGZIEEDGE, and on Instagram at Suze.edge. And those are the main places that I hang out during the day, far too much.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. It was lovely being able to talk to you live and not just watch each other's videos on TikTok, which is also always fun as well. But welcome to the companion family. It's been a great hour. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.